The Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice wants to see a change in the investigation of a recent fatal shooting by the Boston police. This was the shooting of Terrence Coleman, who was killed after his mother had called for an ambulance. To talk about the committee's request is its staff attorney, Sophia Hall. Sophia, maybe for the viewers who might not have been quite tightly tuned into this case, talk about the conflicting stories around this particular shooting.
Certainly, Chris. So on October 30th, Terrence Coleman's mother called for assistance because her son was having a difficult time. He suffered from mental health issues, and she thought that she was calling for help. And by the end of that interaction, what ended up happening was her son was shot and killed. When her mother called for help, EMTs and police arrived on the scene, the EMTs first and then subsequently police. What's still open for debate, the facts that we are looking for, the truth that we are looking for, is whether or not Terrence Coleman did in fact have a knife or a bottle of juice in his hands when he was shot and killed.
No, I guess what makes this even more complicated is that, on the one hand, somebody could be giving a false account, but on the other hand, you could have different parties giving true accounts because, well, they just happen to see different things.
Well, I think this is exactly why the Lawyers Committee, why we put out this call for an independent prosecutor, because there may sometimes be two sides to a story, but one's right and one's wrong here. And we need to know what that is so that we can move forward. If an indictment needs to be brought, then that needs to occur. And there needs to be some accountability for the shooting and the killing of this young man if that happened. The reality is that this is just an atrocity we keep seeing time and time again nationally. And this shoot to kill mentality that our police departments and police officers are utilizing, it's not okay. And there needs to be better training for de-escalating situations like this, in particular with Terrence Coleman and other sort of victims that are dealing with mental health issues. There needs to be a sensitive response to the public that has that. And if we're going to be community policers, then we have to figure out how to engage with all people, people of color, people with mental health issues, even when it's difficult.
Well, this is a case that right now is being investigated by the district attorney's office, which is pretty much standard. What is the problem with having it done that way?
Well, what you'd like to see is something that's independent so that it's transparent. And again, that the accountability that the public wants is actually received. Our district attorney's office works hand in hand day to day with the Boston Police Department. You'd like to see something where there isn't such a close relationship in looking at these facts, determining the truth, and then bringing indictments.
Who would do it, though? Would it be another DA's office or the Attorney General's office? Is there any sense of at least how it's done in other states sometimes?
Well, so we actually had a bill back in 2015, I believe, that was presented, that was offered by Carvalho regarding sort of an independent authority that would be appointed by the Attorney General's office. A special prosecutor could be anyone. But again, what's important here is not who you pick per se, but it's the idea of having something that's transparent that can be able to bring the truth to light. I think that in addition to the fact that we don't have that procedure here, we see this nationally. For example, in the Tamir Rice case, which is my hometown in Cleveland, Ohio, when that case was brought forward, there wasn't an indictment. There was a lot of questions about, was the procedure proper? Was the procedure transparent? And at the end, whether the result is right or wrong, if there's no trust in that, then it's not an efficient process, and it's no longer bringing the community to trust the police departments or the government that they're supposed to be able to trust.
We're talking with Sophia Hall from the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice. It is not unusual, unfortunately, to read that a person living with mental illness ends up being either severely injured or even killed in an encounter with authorities. What about the way we prepare for those things? Because they have happened before, they will happen again.
So, at the Lawyers Committee, time and time again, what we have asked for is better training. And that's not just the implicit bias training that's necessary for people to understand how bias affects the way they engage with the world, but also de-escalation training. Again, the shoot to kill mentality for someone who's aggravated in addition to having a mental health issue is obviously just a recipe for disaster. And so with better training, not only should they be able to respond better to individuals with mental health issues, but individuals of different cultures, of different races, of different backgrounds, whatever the barrier might be, the disconnect might be, could be better addressed.
Sophia, I want to ask you about another project that you've been working on, and this is the election protection. A lot of us were bracing for widespread and severe, infringements on voting rights. So I know there were some problems, but it seemed that there weren't that many, or at least not that many, that were very, really standing out there.
So what I can tell you is that while in Massachusetts, we had a pretty good day. We did see issues with just election administration. We saw lots of long lines. We saw lots of frustrated voters. We saw some broken machines. We saw some late machines. We saw some questions about whether or not provisional ballots were proper or a challenge ballot was proper. But throughout the United States, we did see some infringement of the right to vote down in the South. They did have issues. They did have reports of people being sort of turned away due to presence of third parties. We didn't see that here in Massachusetts, but I think it's clear that the right to vote, that crown jewel of American liberties, is still under attack, and that we did have a job to be done on Tuesday.
From my own experience in Boston with one of the early voting days, there was a long line, but it was moving very steadily. The people there seemed to be very helpful. But I guess it just shows, even if things work right, it tells you that it's not easy to make it work right.
No, I mean, it's not an easy job, and nobody says it is. I think that the Elections Division did a great job. We worked hand in hand with them on Tuesday to resolve problems. And to be quite frank, I'm proud of the fact that the Commonwealth has early voting. The Lawyers Committee sits on the Election Modernization Coalition, which is a coalition that fought for the early voting bill, that awarded many of the 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts with gold or silver medals for basically exceeding what the law required for access to early voting. So I think this is just the beginning. I think we're going to see improvements as we move forward.
All right, well, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
From the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice, Sophia Hall.